Gamification. I love it. It changed my classroom. And if you can gamify anything, something simple, the kids are going to remember it more. They don't want to let their teammates down, and they will work hard. Here's the catch. There has to be a winning team. This ain't Little League. They ain't all that good, okay? Not everybody gets a trophy up in here. There's a winning team, and I give them two options. One, a full-size candy bar. Two, it's an oops pass, which is I messed something up, and I want to drop my lowest grade. And I push them toward that oops pass, and that costs me nothing. But they have to get on consensus, okay? On answers, on everything, so they get to hear each other's brains. I love gamification, and if I can gamify something, I will do it. That's when I found Teach Like a Pirate. Dave Burgess and his strategies, I started changing my teaching even more. Experience lessons. What are your life-changing lessons? Oh my goodness, he teaches history to 11th graders, and I thought, okay, not just gamification, now I can stage my room in a way that creates buzz, and it creates, the kids are excited. What is she gonna do today? So I started staging my room. And I was silly during Halloween. I was sweeping around the room. I was in some sort of costume. And I would have Edgar Allan Poe's Hand from the Grave. Okay, this thing is from the Dollar Tree, and it is $1 for 2. And let's talk about COVID for a second and the flu. You want to give kids a high five? Check it out. And I swoop around the room with this. And don't think that my lessons aren't rigorous. They are rigorous. These kids are analyzing literature, but it is so fun. I would always have a hat on, these fake candles. And so it was silly in Halloween, but when we have a funeral for Anne Frank and her family, I have football players breaking down and crying because Anne became their friend. I love a Socratic seminar. These Socratic seminars are so insightful. And I teach kids the ages of 11 to 15. And you think about that time in someone's life, it's hard. And these Socratic seminars really help me to learn who they are and who they want to become. And if you think about babies, if you think about how we teach babies to read, what are they going to do first? They're going to talk. And so we've got an inner circle, we've got an outer circle, and these are life skills that our kids have to have. And even with the trauma of COVID, and then they have cell phones and they're in them all day, and they don't know how to interact or disagree in a respectful manner. And if we aren't teaching that, that's huge. I love a traditional inner-outer circle. I call it boardroom. Welcome to the boardroom. I respectfully disagree, and this is why. And you get a point for talking. You can get a point taken away, so it's some more gamification. I like the speed discussion. It's kind of set up like speed dating. I don't say that in middle school. But they have to move every 3 minutes, and to get full points, they have to keep the conversation going in a respectful manner. And I just kind of pop around and listen. And I've got some video of that on Twitter that I'll send you. And I also like a formal debate, like teach them how to debate. And then I go into the place your building has it too, the place where they put all the discarded things, the desk graveyard, where things go to die. And I find old trophies, and I repurpose them as my Academy Award. And the class votes on who did the best. And I love that. And the kids love it. Here are a couple of my babies with the Academy Award. Here's a traditional Socratic seminar. Oh, I love it. I am a big fan of Susan Kovalick's work. And Susan Kovalick has done research on the brain-based classroom. Our brain research, that's part of our job. Part of our job is to keep up with those kinds of trends. Do you think kids are going to do well if your entire room is painted red? The answer is no. Because kids should only see colors from nature. Soft blues, greens, browns, okay? If there's a ton of patterns and there's all of that isn't good, they're all over the place. If you have a ton of clutter in your classroom, kids have a hard time focusing. If you've got 10,000 posters everywhere with a quote, they're not looking at you, they're looking at Garfield on the wall. No. So I'm a big fan of setting up a brain-based classroom. Kids should have good memories of your room. Smell memories. So your classroom should smell nice, and it should be a nice place to be. And every year, I will set up a brain-based classroom, and I think it matters. Colors matter, and smells matter. And why are we dying on the food hill? I'm not saying I'm gonna let them have a Monster drink with a bag of chips, but if they've got water and goldfish, every time you take a bite of something, you fire synapses off in the brain. Some studies have shown that gum chewing is actually more effective at waking you up than coffee. So why are we fussing about that? I love using props in my class. I have this huge teaching stick of power. I have a throne in my room that I call the throne of knowledge. I have this guy, love this guy. I have these candles. And if I think, I've got hundreds of them, and I restock them with my teacher money. And if a kid is doing really well and they're working really hard, I'll just put a candle of knowledge, candle of power, candle of poetry on their desk, and they love it. I don't know why it works, but it does. I went to Walmart after Valentine's Day, and these were a penny, and I bought all of them. And when I taught Tupac's The Rose That Grew from the Crack in the Concrete, and Ben E. King's Spanish Harlem, I bought all of them, and I put little tablecloths out. And I was their teacher, but I was also their server. And they would ask, and they came in, it looked like a fancy restaurant. And talk about upping engagement. Do they remember that the rose isn't just a rose? She's a person. And the concrete isn't the concrete, it's that life is hard. They're gonna remember it. What can you do in your class or in your school that will connect your kids, our kids, to the community? I do something called a community project, okay? And the kids have to become a charity in front of the class. And I have a summit of billionaires. And they have to do a persuasive presentation to try to get that money. And I tell them that if they win, if they're the winning group, they get $100,000, and then I give them a candy bar. Yes. Every time I do that community project, I have kids get really excited. I teach them to call on the phone, heaven forbid. I give them a script so they can learn. And I have kids get so excited, and then they're attached to that charity for the rest of their lives. That's connecting our kids to the community. And I love that. And they always feel like I'm doing something real. I'm not just working on a worksheet. This is real. And it's all embedded curriculum. And they're learning and they're doing real research. And I love that. What about your entire team doing a murder mystery? We had a teacher that killed the cougar. Okay, he's our mascot. And there were clues all over the school. It was a whodunit. The science classes were doing forensics, math and science worked together, history and English worked together, and by the end of the day they had to figure out, with the claim evidence commentary, who killed the cougar. It was so fun. Is it work? Absolutely. But hard work is worth it because our kids matter. And so doing a murder mystery in your room would be fun. I'm a huge proponent of teaching bell to bell. We have no time to lose, none. And so anytime the kids ask, we have free time? The answer is always going to be no. We have too much to do. And one of the things I like, if you have like an awkward 5 minutes, 10 minutes, I introduced this at the beginning of the year, and it's student TED Talks. And we listen to some kids do TED Talks, appropriate ones. And then they're given a note card and they're to time themselves. And maybe once a week, once every 2 weeks, we'll have a kid get up and do their TED Talk. And they hold the candle of power and they talk into it like it's a microphone. Here are some of my precious babies doing TED Talks. And we really get to learn about them and who they are. A lot of times, they'll really open up. Because if you create a space in which kids are willing to take big risks, the dividends pay off huge. I love a student job fair. It is so fun. So put kids in groups of 2 or 3 and have them make a logo, have them come up with interview questions, and have a student job fair. The years that I've done it have been fun. And the kids take it really serious. I had a kid who gave me a run for my money every day. And his company that he made, he was serious about that. And we had another class come into the job fair and they interviewed for jobs. And this kid, I've never seen anything like it. He was like, tell us your best quality if you want to work at my place. And I mean, he was serious. And as kids came out, they were like, I was nervous. I hope I get the job. And they wrote offer letters and it gave them some real life experience. I think you got to lean in. I think you have to embrace what's happening in our world, whether that be silly, like the Renegade Challenge or the death of Black Panther. I think as teachers, you have to know when to scrap a lesson when something important in our world has happened. Years ago, I was giving a test, and I was a new teacher, and that was my plan, and I didn't have an extra plan, and I didn't know. And down the hall comes the kids, and we knew something had happened at lunch, something bad. Kids were crying. Some kids had filmed it. It was a fight. And I just got them settled down, and I just gave them the test. How do you think they did? No, they did not do great. And I remember, going home and thinking that I failed them, and I did. Your brain can't take a test if you're in fight or flight mode. And they all were. They had all witnessed something really violent. And so I learned from then on out that sometimes you have to scrap a lesson and drop into a community circle. And that's important because the kids can't learn unless they feel safe again. When Chadwick Boseman died, I knew that we had to scrap our lesson and teach about him. Watch some videos of him. Same with Kobe Bryant. But also the silly things, like the Renegade Challenge. Let's say you have 2 minutes, 3 minutes left in class. You could film the Renegade Challenge and have another class vote on who did the best, another grade level. And it builds community in your room. This was back in 2016, and it was the Mannequin Challenge, and it was being perfectly still.
We are doing the Mannequin Challenge in second hour. We only have 2 minutes left, and we're gonna see if everybody can say perfectly still. This is amazing, except for Dylan is laughing. Look at this though right here. This is something special. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 kids completely still.
I often say to the baby teachers that I'm teaching, these are little bitty kids trapped in great big bodies, especially secondary. They could be a giant 250-pound football player who's a junior, but he's a little bitty kid trapped in great big bodies. And sometimes we have to remember that as educators. Little bitty kid, great big body. Years ago, I had my counselor come, and she came, and I said, if you're gonna tell me something about a kid, and if it's behavior, I don't wanna know, because I always wanna just start with this clean slate, okay? Clean slate. And she said, but I have to because he's been in trouble with the law. And so I read about some of the gnarly things that he did over the summer, and it was heartbreaking. And she said he's either already in a gang or he's actively trying to pursue to get into one. And here he came. And it was like, he did duck to get into my room. He's an 8th grader, 14. He was probably 6'4" and huge. And as he lowered himself into the desk that was way too small for him, and it like just creaked underneath, kind of walked around the room, and all the kids were kind of scared, you could tell. First day of school. And I got to him, I like to walk around to all the kids and I learn their names, and because we pronounce their names right, friends. It's big. We pronounce their names right, and we are relentless about pronouncing their names right. So I get to him, and I said, it's Dante, right? And he said, I go by Big D. And I go, and like the rest of the kids were like, no, you don't. Like, and I said, you know what, unless your grandma or your mama or your dad tell me otherwise, your guardian, I'm gonna call you Dante. And he was like, whatever. And then he did something I'll always remember. He put his head down on his desk, put his thumb directly in his mouth, and he went to sleep. And I remember looking at him like, he's a great big teddy bear. He's a little bitty kid trapped in a great big body. Dante was one of my published authors that year. He wrote a beautiful poem called Only a Baby, a Boy of 3, when my brother was shot in front of me. Sometimes my kids just need kindergarten story time, and we'll put on a crackling fire and we'll sit and I'll read to them because they need to hear the inflection in my voice. I love kindergarten story time, and they do too. Can we have kindergarten story time? That's what they ask.
How can you get out of your 4 walls? What can you do to get the kids moving? Brain research shows that kids should never sit for longer than their age. So my students shouldn't be sitting for longer than 15 minutes at a time. I have to build in movement in my lesson. That means your 18-year-olds can only sit for 18 minutes at a time before their brain starts to shut down. How can you get out? Can you chalk the school with math problems? Can you learn MLA format with chalk? Can you find an empty classroom and transform it into a gallery for art, for English? Can you set up stations in the gym and have them run from station to station for test prep? What about just going on an Easter egg hunt or a scavenger hunt? Can you yarn bomb the school? What can you do to get out of your 4 walls?
What else can you do to be a memorable teacher? Can you have a poetry slam? Transform your room? Bongo drums? And recite poetry? They'll remember that poem forever. They'll remember that time in your room. Manipulatives? What can you do? It's hard for ELA to use manipulatives, but that doesn't deter me. What can you do to help your kinesthetic learners? What about having a meeting of the minds? Have them come together and have a discussion as a historical person historical figure of their choice. Have them design a school. What would their school look like if money was not an object? And serious stuff, not just like recess all day, yeah. Like serious. And I love this one. Eat with them. They don't know how. Sometimes our middle class values as teachers, we forget that some of our kids don't know how to sit at a table and eat and talk. Eat with them once a quarter. That's 4 times a year. Eat with them as a family. One of my favorite lessons of the year is when I have to have the kids take some sort of mundane object with symbolism, figurative language, and personify that object and write a poem about it. So, some people have used a candle or glasses and one of the most heartbreaking poems I got was about testing. And this little girl wrote hers about a Scantron. And she felt like the only way out of poverty was education and was testing. I'm gonna read it to you now. It's called Bubble Sheet. He defines me. Bubble Sheet. He defines me. A through E, so intimidating. One wrong move, imperfection is proved. OSTP, SAT. My future, he decides. Competing scores as high as the sky. I can kiss college and corporate America goodbye. 7:25. The shameful life is now mine. Would you like fries? Is my new punchline. Luxuries I can't afford because I am poor. Bubble Sheet, the old friend that defines me. She got a full ride scholarship. Precious. And she learned that education was absolutely her way out. And it was. Listen, if you can't teach them today, love them. And just maybe, you can teach them tomorrow.